on the Declaration of Independence and extending inalienable rights to all people of the world and globalization, and how we need to view the inalienable rights as belonging to every person in the world. Yet you oppose war and you oppose sanctions. How do you propose that we extend those individual rights against violent regimes like the Taliban, whose sole purpose is to suppress those individual rights? What is the way to let those people have those rights without violence, without...
Yes. Very good question. Yeah, there are regimes around the world which are suppressing individual rights and human rights, and I talked about human rights needing to be extended to everybody in the world. Now, there are limits to what we can do in extending human... We do as much as we can. The Taliban is an evil regime. It has been an evil regime for some time. We only discovered its evil like yesterday. See, but the Taliban was evil when it was allied with the United States a number of years ago, when the United States helped create the Taliban. And what I'm suggesting is that the United States doesn't have a good record in acting against tyrannical regimes in other parts of the world. The record of the United States is generally in supporting or instituting repressive regimes in other parts of the world. So yes, we face a problem as people concerned with the rights of women in Afghanistan and the rights of people in Iraq, of what do we do about that? And the problem is, how do we gain human rights? How do we support human rights? How do we help people act against repressive regimes without killing more people? Now, the sanctions against Iraq, we are not helping the people of Iraq by consigning hundreds of thousands of them to their deaths. We are not helping the women of Afghanistan by bombing Afghanistan. We are creating terror in Afghanistan. I don't know if the Taliban is terrorized, but the people who live in Kabul are terrorized. Can you imagine living in Kabul right now, and the lights are all out, and you don't have any power in a city which already is desperate and poor, and you're living in constant fear of the airplanes coming over, and you know that the airplanes can hit your house as well as hit some airfield. I mean, yes, we have a problem of doing something about tyranny all over the world, but the one clear thing in my mind is that you don't solve those problems by violence and war. You have to find other ways of doing that. That is the great challenge before us in this century. How to deal with tyranny, how to deal with inequality, how to deal with poverty, and how to do it without killing a lot of people. And you cannot trust the governments of the world, especially the powerful governments of the world, to make their first priority human rights. Their record shows that's not so. It will take citizens' movements in our country joining citizens' movements in other countries to forge international bonds of solidarity in order to help to overthrow those governments and establish decent societies. And we have to do that everywhere in the world, and we even have to do it here.
Excuse me, one last question, and this guy's been waiting a long time, so we'll let him ask the question.
I appreciate that. This has to do with what he was just saying, and I don't think I have to hear what you're saying. I thought the best thing about what you were talking about when you were speaking was that we need to be honest, and that is the most important value in the world, period. I think the way we can address this, and the way we can address every terrorist act, every problem with war we've been having, what we really can do is force our government. The most disturbing thing that I'm hearing from George Bush, and that it seems 90% of the population of the country are believing, the most disturbing thing he said is that the reason this happened, the reason we were attacked, is because we're the brightest beacon of freedom. That is the most bullshit I've ever heard about. That makes no sense. So, my solution, as to what you were saying, is that we need full disclosure. We need to force full disclosure about what led up to this in the first place, having to do with Saudi Arabia, Israel, Palestine, et cetera, et cetera. I'm hoping that Zinn, as an historian, can give us, some details. I haven't finished your book yet, maybe it's here. What put these guys in the situation of wanting to do what they did? Because it had nothing to do with our culture and the way we live, except for the fact that we've been shoving it down their throats.
Okay, let me say something. Let me just say something about that, because I think it was a great omission in my talk when I talked about looking for the roots of terrorism, and I didn't really get into what I think is crucial. And I think you're right. The terrorists are not attacking us because we're liberal and democratic and rational as opposed to their irrationality, and secular as opposed to their fundamentalism. We have our own fundamentalism. But I think there are, beneath that, the fanaticism that led to that violence in New York, there are genuine grievances which are held not just by those terrorists, but are held by large numbers of people throughout the Middle East. And of course, large numbers of people around the world, too. They have grievances against what American policy has been ever since World War II. Grievances against the way we supported repressive regimes in all of these places. Their immediate grievances in the Middle East are, yes, the refusal of the United States to insist that Israel leave the occupied territories, and the continued giving billions and billions of dollars to Israel in arms, and plus we give it to the Arab states too. We've been arming all the sides of all wars for years and watching them kill one another while our businesses have made profit off the arms race. We have to take a very honest look at American foreign policy and how that has created deep anger at the United States. Our policy in Israel, the sanctions against Iraq, and the stationing of troops in Saudi Arabia. Now, you can expand that and say the stationing of troops everywhere. If our government is going to station troops in 19 major military bases around the world, and many more minor bases around the world, is going to station warships on every sea, is going to have troops in Korea, and troops in Okinawa, and troops in Japan, and troops in the Middle East, and now troops in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. If you are going to maintain a military presence all over the world, you are going to anger people. And so there are legitimate grievances that we have to be addressed. We need a re-examination of American policy in the world. We have to start thinking we must not be the military superpower in the world. If we are going to be a superpower in the world, let us be a moral superpower in the world.